You chose the summary. Of course you did. It was right there, clean and condensed. 10 pages of dense argument collapsed into 8 bullet points, and you read it in 4 minutes and closed the tab feeling like you had handled something, like you had been efficient. You moved on with your day, checked the box, and felt the quiet satisfaction of a person who was on top of things. Nothing about that moment felt like a mistake. That is the problem, because here is what actually happened. Your brain took a shortcut and then quietly charged you for it in a currency you did not know you were carrying. Not time, not money, something harder to track. The thing that makes an outcome feel like it belongs to you. The thing that makes a result feel earned rather than retrieved. You got the information. You did not get the meaning. And the gap between those two things is invisible right up until the moment it is not. This is not about discipline. This is not a lecture about reading whole books or doing things the hard way for the sake of suffering. This is about something much stranger and more specific than that. It is about a flaw in the way your brain calculates value, one that has been measured, documented, and reproduced in labs under controlled conditions, and that is almost certainly shaping decisions you made this week without you knowing it was happening. Here's the core of it. Your brain does not actually assess value very well. Value is slippery, context-dependent, hard to measure in real time, so your brain does what it always does when the real answer is complicated. It finds a proxy, a simpler signal that correlates with the thing it actually wants to know. And the proxy it reaches for, more often than you would expect, is effort. How hard was this to make? How long did it take? How much did it cost someone in sweat and time and struggle? More effort in, the brain assumes, means more value out. It is a heuristic, a rule of thumb, and like all heuristics, it is fast and mostly useful and occasionally catastrophic. The catastrophic part is this: the heuristic runs in both directions. When you perceive high effort, you perceive high value. When you perceive low effort, you perceive low value. And when you are the one who took the shortcut, when you are the person who read the summary instead of the book, who used the template instead of building from scratch, who let the algorithm make the decision, your brain applies the heuristic to you, to your own output, to your own result. The thing you produced with low effort feels worth less, not consciously, not in a way you would ever say out loud, but the signal is there, running quietly in the background, and it has consequences. A research team led by Justin Kruger published findings on this in 2004 that should have been more alarming than they were. Participants were shown poems, paintings, essays. They were given information about how long each one took to produce. Then they rated them. Same output, different stated effort. The ones described as taking longer were consistently rated as higher quality. The evaluators were not stupid. They were simply human. Their brains were doing what brains do, using effort as a stand-in for quality because quality is hard and effort is legible. And before you locate yourself comfortably on the observer side of that experiment, understand that you are not the observer. You are the painting. You are the essay. Every time you produce something, every time you make a decision or complete a project or learn a skill, the people around you are running this calculation on your work. And more unsettlingly, you are running it on yourself. You are constantly, silently pricing your own outputs by the effort you perceive you put into them. Take a shortcut and the price drops. Not in the eyes of the market, in the eyes of the only judge who is always in the room. There is a related phenomenon called the IKEA Effect, documented by Michael Norton, Daniel Machon, and Dan Ariely in 2012, and the name tells you most of what you need to know. People who partially assemble furniture themselves rate that furniture as nearly as valuable as expert-made equivalents. They did not build it. They followed instructions with an Allen key in a poorly ventilated room and experienced moderate frustration. And yet the effort, such as it was, created something that pure purchase could not. Ownership, not legal ownership, psychological ownership. The felt sense that this thing is mine because I put something of myself into making it exist. That feeling is not trivial. It is not a pleasant bonus. It is the mechanism by which your brain transforms external outcomes into internal identity. The IKEA effect is not about furniture. It is about what happens when effort is the thread connecting you to the thing you produced, and what happens to that thread when effort disappears. So go back to the summary. Go back to the 4-minute read, the box you checked, the satisfied feeling of having handled something. The information you absorbed was probably accurate. The bullet points were probably fair representations of the argument. By most measurable standards, you are now more informed than you were before. That is real. That is not nothing. But here's what you did not get. You did not get the struggle of following a difficult argument across 20 pages and losing it and finding it again. You did not get the moment where something clicked that you did not expect to click. You did not get the friction that encodes a thing deeply enough to stay. You got the destination without the road, and your brain, which built a whole architecture of value assessment around what roads cost, noticed the difference. It is noticing right now. It just has not told you yet. What you are about to find out is where that silence has been leaving its marks. Your brain is running a price gun over everything you do. You cannot turn it off. Every result you produce, every win you land, every skill you claim, it scans for the same thing first. Not quality, not accuracy, not whether the thing actually works. Effort. How much did this cost you? And if the answer is not much, the price it prints is lower than the real one. That is not a metaphor. That is a measurable, reproducible, documented feature of how human cognition assigns value, and it is running right now on the outputs of your life, whether you consented to that or not. So let us talk about what that actually costs you. Justin Kruger and his colleagues ran a study in 2004 that is almost funny in how clean the result is. They showed people poems, paintings, essays, identical work, same quality across every condition. The only variable was how long participants were told each piece took to produce. That is it. That is the whole manipulation. And the ratings moved in lockstep with the stated effort. More time, higher quality scores. Less time, lower ones. Nobody in that study was trying to be fooled. Nobody chose to weight effort over actual quality. They just did, automatically, because the brain needed a fast answer to a slow question, and effort was the fastest signal available. Now flip it around, because this is the part that should make you uncomfortable. The same mechanism that makes you overvalue a handmade ceramic mug is the one that makes you quietly undervalue your own work when you know you did not struggle for it. The bias is not just something that happens to your judgment of other people's things. It happens to your judgment of yourself. Every time you took the shorter path, every time you used the template or the summary or the algorithm, your brain ran the calculation and came back with the same answer. Receipt does not match the purchase, and it filed that away. There's a related finding that hits even harder. Norton, Moshon, and Ariely documented the IKEA effect in 2012. People who partially assembled their own furniture rated it as nearly equivalent in value to expert-built pieces. They had done almost nothing objectively impressive. They had followed a diagram and tightened some bolts. But that small investment of effort created something that pure purchase could not produce. Ownership, not the legal kind, the felt kind. The kind your brain uses to decide whether a result belongs to you or just happened near you. That distinction matters more than it sounds, because belonging is the mechanism. Effort is the thread your brain uses to stitch outcomes to identity. Snap that thread and the outcome is still there, technically yours, but floating, unattached. You can point to it, but you cannot quite stand behind it. You have probably felt this. You got something you did not fully earn, and instead of feeling good, you felt vaguely fraudulent. You could not explain it. Now you can. Your brain ran the audit and the numbers did not add up. This goes deeper than confidence. DC and Ryan spent decades building self-determination theory, and the core of it is this: intrinsic motivation, the kind that actually sustains effort over time, requires perceived competence. And perceived competence only accumulates through effortful engagement. You cannot shortcut your way to it. You can shortcut your way to the credential, the output, the finished thing, but the internal register that tracks whether you are actually capable, that one only moves when you do the work that was hard. Take enough shortcuts and you are not saving energy. You are starving that register. The confidence you feel starts running on fumes, propped up by outputs your brain has already discounted. There are studies on ghost-written work and AI-generated outputs where the creators themselves, Even when praised, even when the work performed well by every external measure, reported lower pride and lower attachment than people who produced comparable work themselves. They knew, not consciously. But the brain kept the receipt, and the numbers were wrong, and some part of them felt the gap even when they could not name it. Here's where it stops being a quirk and starts being a problem. A real, structural, compounding problem. Career first. People who build their professional practice on other people's frameworks, who rely heavily on templates and tools and borrowed thinking without first developing their own, plateau. Not always, but earlier and more often than people who did the slower, uglier version of the work first. And when they plateau, they report something specific. A weak sense of professional identity. They know what they do, but not who they are in relation to it. The work is not quite theirs. The expertise does not feel load-bearing. That is the effort heuristic eating the foundation from the inside. Relationships. Conflict resolution research shows that partners who habitually take the easy exit, stonewalling, deflecting, changing the subject, letting things dissolve without resolution, report lower relationship satisfaction over time even when the surface tension decreases. Avoiding the hard conversation feels like peace. The brain knows it is not. The discomfort of unresolved difficulty is still there, just submerged, and it accrues interest. And then there is the learning problem, which is the most damaging of all three because it affects everything else. Slamecka and Graf demonstrated the generation effect in 1978, and it has held up across decades of replication. Information you generate yourself, struggle to produce, fight to reconstruct from incomplete memory, is retained significantly better than information you simply receive. The difficulty is not the obstacle to learning. The difficulty is the mechanism of it. When you read the summary, you got the correct information delivered smoothly into your head, and it left almost as smoothly. When you wrestle with the source material, misunderstand it, backtrack, rebuild your understanding from pieces, that process encodes it. The friction is the point, and the compounding part is the cruelest part. Every effort you avoid makes the next one feel proportionally harder. The threshold creeps up. Things that would have been manageable become daunting. Things that would have been daunting become paralyzing. You are not just missing the benefit of the effort you skipped. You are paying a surcharge on every effort that comes after it. So what do you do? Because this is not a character flaw. It is a systems problem, and systems problems have interventions. The first one is effort logging. Before you evaluate any output you produce, write down what you put in. Time, attempts, decisions, dead ends. This is not journaling. It is creating an accurate record your brain can reference when it runs the pricing calculation. You are not inflating the value of your work. You are giving your brain actual data instead of letting it guess low. The second one comes from Robert Bjork's work on desirable difficulty from 1994. Introduce friction into learning deliberately. Retrieval practice instead of rereading. Spaced repetition instead of cramming. Generative notes where you close the source and write what you remember before checking what you missed. These methods feel slower and worse while you are doing them. They produce dramatically better retention. The discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the sound of encoding happening. The third one is what you might call the draft zero rule. Before you reach for the template, the tool, the shortcut, produce one unassisted attempt. Ugly, incomplete, wrong in places. It does not matter. That attempt is what creates psychological ownership over the final product. Use the shortcut after. Let it improve the thing you already started. The sequence is everything. Effort first, then assistance. Not assistance instead of effort. Flip that order and you get the output without the ownership, the result without the receipt, the thing without the thread that ties it to you. A minimum floor, not a ceiling. You are not trying to maximize struggle. You are trying to ensure that enough effort registers in the brain's ledger to make the outcome feel owned. That threshold is lower than you think. It is not about suffering. It is about contact. You need enough friction to leave a mark. The shortcut is not the enemy. The shortcut taken before any effort is the enemy. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a tool and a replacement. Go back to that moment. The summary. The tab you closed. The the quiet satisfaction of having handled something efficiently and moved on. You felt fine, nothing hurt, nothing flagged. The day continued, and you were a person who was on top of things, and that felt true enough to believe. It was not wrong exactly. That is not the revelation. The revelation is what was happening underneath the feeling. While you registered satisfaction, your brain was running a separate calculation entirely, one you were not invited to observe, pricing the result against the effort, finding the ratio too clean, and quietly filing the outcome somewhere below the line. Not worthless, just not quite yours, not quite load-bearing, not the kind of thing you could point to in a hard moment and feel the weight of it holding. You did not notice because the shortcut delivered everything it promised. The information was there. The box was checked. The surface was intact. What was missing was invisible. And invisible losses are the most expensive kind because you cannot budget for what you cannot see. Here is what you now know that you did not know before. The brain does not evaluate outcomes in isolation. It evaluates them in context. The context it reaches for first, before quality, before accuracy, before any external measure of success, is effort. How much did this cost? What was the friction? Where is the evidence that you were here, that you fought for this, that this result passed through you and not just around you? When that evidence is thin, the valuation drops. And the valuation dropping is not just a feeling. It is a structural event. It changes what you retain, what you own, what you are willing to defend. And over time, quietly, incrementally, it changes who you understand yourself to be. That last part is the one worth sitting with. Identity is not declared, it is built. It is assembled from every instance of effortful engagement you have ever had with the world. Every moment you pushed into difficulty and came out the other side with something encoded, something real, something that left a mark on both the work and the person doing it. The effort heuristic is not just a quirk in how you price objects. It is the mechanism your brain uses to construct a self. Feed it friction and it builds something solid. Feed it frictionless outputs and it builds something that looks solid from the outside and flexes under pressure. This is why the shortcuts that feel most efficient are sometimes the most costly. Not because efficiency is wrong. Efficiency is fine. Efficiency after effort is genuinely useful. A tool that improves something you already started building belongs to you because you were already there before it arrived. But a tool that replaces the starting, that steps in before you have made any contact with the material, does not save you time. It saves you discomfort at the expense of ownership. And your brain knows the difference even when you do not. The sequence is the thing. Effort first, then the shortcut, not as a rule invented for moral reasons. As a structural reality of how psychological ownership forms, you do not have to struggle for hours. You do not have to make it hard for the sake of difficulty. You have to make contact. One unpolished attempt. One draft that belongs entirely to you, wrong in places, incomplete, not ready to show anyone. That draft is not the product, it is the thread. It is what ties the final thing to the person who made it, regardless of how much help arrived afterward. And here's the version of that moment you can have now, the one that was always available but required this particular lens to see. You open the book summary, you read the first 2 bullet points, and then you close it. Not because summaries are forbidden, because you now know what the summary cannot give you, and you want that thing more than you want the 4 minutes it saves. You open a blank document. You write down what you already know about the topic, incomplete and approximate, before you read a word of the source. You are wrong about some of it. That is the point. The effort of being wrong and correcting it is the mechanism that makes the correction stick. Then you read. Then you use the summary if you want. The summary is now a tool in service of something you already own, rather than a replacement for the ownership itself. That is a different life than the one running on pure efficiency. Not harder exactly, just more deliberate about where the friction goes. You are not adding suffering. You are redirecting the contact, making sure that enough of it lands on you before you hand anything off, making sure the brain's price gun has something real to scan before it prints the tag. The person who closed that tab feeling fine was not doing something shameful. They were doing something completely reasonable in the absence of this information. Shortcuts are everywhere and they are fast, and nothing in the environment is going to tell you what they cost because the cost does not show up anywhere visible. It shows up in a plateau you cannot explain, a confidence that deflates faster than it should, a skill you thought you had until you needed it somewhere without the template, a relationship where the easy exits compounded into a distance neither person remembers choosing. The damage is quiet and slow, and it does not announce itself, which is precisely why it is worth announcing now. You have the lens. You cannot put it down. You are going to see this the next time you reach for the shortcut before you have made any contact with the work. You are going to feel the moment the sequence matters, and some of those times you will take the shortcut anyway because you are busy and tired and the deadline is real and that is allowed. But you will know what you are trading. You will make the trade with accurate information instead of making it in the dark. That is the difference between a brain running a bias unchecked and a brain that has been handed the manual to its own wiring. The bias does not disappear. It runs on the same hardware it always did. But you are in the room now. You know what the price gun is scanning for. And knowing that, you can decide deliberately, consciously, with full information what you want your effort to build.